In this chapter, you're going to continue your exploration of Keynesian economics by examining, in particular, the notion of manipulating the economy by adjusting government spending and taxes. And this is what's called fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is essentially a deliberate use of the government's budget in order to manipulate the phases of the business cycle, in order to manipulate the states of the economy that we exist in. So you will encounter again the spending multiplier and the tax multiplier. The examples and formulas in this chapter are really the same as the examples and formulas from the previous chapter on aggregate expenditure. What's different about this chapter is it presents another visual explanation of how the economy can be manipulated according to Keynes by looking at what's called the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. I had you skip chapter 20, which focused a great deal on the aggregate supply and aggregate demand model, mostly because I didn't want you to get caught up in the different philosophical perspectives of it. But if you've had microeconomics, it might make a lot of sense. But aggregate demand and aggregate supply kind of look like the supply and demand of microeconomics. So you will explore how Keynes believed that we could shift the aggregate demand curve in order to bring the economy to full employment. And this is just a different way of visualizing how that actually looks like. The chapter also discusses the notion of a balanced budget. And obviously, if the government wants to balance its budget, if it increases its spending, it's going to need the money from somewhere, so it would have to increase its taxes also. And so the chapter will discuss the notion of a balanced budget, as well as some of the realities that Keynes actually had some challenges. The theory had some challenges beginning in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, a different school of thought became prevalent called supply-side economics. Supply-side policy essentially said that the government needed to focus on things to help the businesses out during a recession instead of helping the consumers out during a recession. And likewise, if we were in an expansion, the government could slow things down by increasing regulations or increasing taxes on businesses, and that would slow the economy down. So supply side essentially shifted the perspective away from the consumers driving the economy and back to the businesses driving the economy. And so what you should get out of this chapter is essentially a review, really, of the Keynesian multiplier effect. You'll explore graphically what that looks like with a different perspective, the aggregate supply, aggregate demand shifts. I'm not going to test you greatly on aggregate supply, aggregate demand. I just want you to focus on what really causes those shifts to occur. And then you will explore the notion of supply-side policies. These were all different kinds of economic theories that have been developed since the Great Depression and have been used for quite some time in different political administrations in order to manipulate the economy.